Good morning, everyone. My name is Rahim Kaba, Director of Product Marketing at eSignLive by VASCO, and I'm here with my colleague Michael Williams, our Developer Community Manager. At eSignLive, we've been working with financial services organizations for over 20 years now. And with the help of our eSignature technology, they've been able to completely digitize and automate their key document-based processes across multiple channels. So the online channel, the branch, face-to-face with advisors, and the call center. Unfortunately, mobile has taken a back seat to some of these channels, and the result is that many of the mobile banking apps out there today are simply what I'll call lightweight versions of the online banking experience. So as customer experience bubbles up as a priority in your organizations, you as developers are being pulled into various mobile initiatives inside of your organization. You're being asked to deliver a fully mobile account opening process and to be able to track the effectiveness of that customer's journey in that mobile channel. So the next question you're going to get asked is, can you build this for us? And that's a bit of a loaded question because there's a lot of things that you need to consider in order to piece together a solution that can fulfill and execute in the online channel, in the mobile channel. You need to consider things like authentication, electronic forms, workflow, signatures, transaction management, and audit trails. All of these things need to be stitched together in an elegant and user-friendly way in order to deliver the experience in the mobile world. So in today's presentation, what we're going to show you here are two things. The first thing is how your customers can apply for a personal loan or any sort of financial product in under a minute using your mobile application. And we'll show you how to add e-signing and workflow capabilities to your apps with our mobile SDKs for iOS and Android. And number two, we're going to show you how to track the effectiveness of that journey that your mobile customers are taking. We're going to leverage some of the underlying data that's being collected as part of the e-sign process and help you pinpoint areas of confusion or drop-off in order to further optimize that experience. Okay, so we're going to get right into the demo now, so I'm going to ask for Michael's help here. And Michael is an existing customer with STU Bank. He prefers using his mobile banking app as his primary channel of engagement. And as he logs in, he's going to notice a rewards and offers call to action on his home screen. He's intrigued. He's interested to see what his bank has to offer. And actually, Michael is headed out on vacation to Hawaii with his family, so he's going to need about £10,000 to fund that vacation. So he sees the personal loan call to action here, and as soon as he clicks the apply button, that's going to kickstart the e-sign process. What you see here is the loan application form. And the UI that you see here is actually available out of the box in our solution. So you as developers don't need to build anything from scratch. The UI is available to you, and there's no effort required there. The way that the document is presented on screen is completely optimized for mobile. Document navigation is really smooth, and there are built-in workflow rules that are guiding Michael through this process. All of Michael's information is also pre-populated into the document because he's already an existing customer. Now, the last thing that he needs to do is apply his signature. And like in the paper world, what Michael's going to do here is apply a handwritten signature. And that's not a requirement. We can use a simple click to sign or tap to sign, but because culturally we're still very accustomed to signing on paper, he's going to use his finger to sign on the mobile-enabled or the touch-enabled device here. There's another option here that we can leverage. For example, if you want to add additional authentication steps to that process and you want to validate the signer's identity again before they complete that transaction, we can leverage things like biometrics, so facial recognition or fingerprint authentication in order to validate their identity again before that whole experience is completed. That's available as part of our larger mobile toolkit, and you can leverage that if your use case requires it. Okay. So that was the first part of the demo. We're going to actually move back into the second part, into the PowerPoint deck, and what we're going to show you here is how to leverage the underlying data that's being collected as part of that e-sign process. Now remember, this is a digital transaction, so we're collecting a lot of information about that process. So who signed, in what order, when, where, how long they spent on each document. This is a goldmine of information that can be exploited to track and improve the overall customer experience. So what we show you here is actually some data that we've leveraged during a specific transaction. So on the top left-hand corner, you're going to see a couple of meters here. The first two on the left, Q1 and Q2, show that the transaction completion rates are relatively low. 45 and 44% of the time, customers actually complete the transaction from beginning to end. That's very low. We want to improve that experience. So how do we do that? How do we optimize that mobile journey? On the bottom, you'll see the transaction drop-offs. So in this case, in this specific example that we're showing you here, there are 5 documents in that transaction. If we look at document number 4, there's something fishy happening here. Transaction drop-offs are considerably high. 45 to 46% of the time, customers are actually abandoning that process. And that could be for a number of reasons. It could be that the document is too long. There might be confusing language or confusing legal terms that are preventing those customers from completing that process. So that's something you definitely want to identify and you want to fix. And leveraging some of the underlying data that's part of that process is going to help you improve and further improve that mobile experience. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. We're going to actually move on to Michael, who's going to walk you through a coding session of how this all works under the hood and how you can actually implement this when you're back in the office. Michael?
Thank you, Raheem. So jumping into the code here, the code that's actually necessary for an application like this one is going to be very simple. So I'm actually going to show a little bit more of the capabilities of the iOS SDK and what's available to you within the code here as well. So the first things first, when we come in, we're going to go to our setup function so that we can set up the connection to eSignLive. We're going to set up just a few properties like the logging level and the actual instance that we're pointing at. So you'll see here that I'm pointing at apps.esignlive.com. We also have instances around the world, in the UK and in the US and Canada and so on and so forth. So if data residency is an issue, we have locations of application to work for you. Moving on down to once we've actually logged in, I'm using my own credentials here. So you'll see that I'm using a login function here, a simple one-liner to log in, using my email, my password, and my credentials. So this would be more of a sender situation where you have an agent in a bank or a door-to-door salesperson or something of that nature where they're actually a sender on your account that's going to be sending the transaction out for signing. In the case of the application that you saw just a few moments ago, it would be more likely be a connection back to your bank server, and then you'd actually use eSignLive code on that side to create a signing session once you've created the package and pass that signing session back in. So there is another login function here that could be used with that code that is sent from your application. So once we've set up the basics of the transaction, we're ready to actually create the transaction itself. So once they've clicked the apply button in the application, again, this would most likely be done on your own server, but if there was a sender scenario where you were creating the transaction locally from the actual mobile device, this would be the way that you would do it. So we call the transaction function, and then down into the transaction function is where we actually do the bulk of the iOS SDK code. And so you're going to see, again, a bunch of one-liners to get all the properties and everything set up for us to create this transaction. The first thing we're going to actually call the transaction function to create the transaction from the SDK. Then we're going to set up a few properties like the transaction name or transaction description. We also have this thing called in-person, so it's an in-person signing scenario which allows you to switch between signers. So if you had again, a mobile salesperson or an agent in the bank where multiple people had to sign, you may set up an in-person signing session so that there's a transition period between signers so there's no confusion on who's signing when. Moving down, a few more properties that we could add, like an expiration date. We could add things like a custom email message. So you have your email templates that are the standard templates that you use, but you may want to include a custom message. That is also available as well. Now that we've set up kind of the basic properties of the transaction, we're ready to do the meat of the transaction, which is going to be the signers, the documents, and actually where they're going to fill out and sign the documents. So you're going to see a simple one-liner here again. I'm going to set up my signer. I need a first name, last name, email address, and then I'm also including a company and a title. Another important item here is the signer ID. So with that role ID, we are actually going to be binding the signatures and fields that are available to that signer. So this is important if there's multiple signers on the transaction for sure, so that the right person is getting the right transaction fields and signatures. So we go ahead and add the signer to the transaction. Again, another simple one-liner. and then we're ready to go add the document in the fields. So we do need a signature. A signature is required for an eSignLive transaction, so we add a simple signature here. We're specifying the location of the signature and that it is a signature type. There are multiple types of fields, including text boxes, check boxes, radio buttons, that sort of thing. We also have automatic fields like signature date that can be automatically populated in the document when we sign the transaction. So that's the type of signature or signature date that we are going to use right here. And you can see that we do have it as the auto signing date. You also may have noticed in the application that we had a loan value text box. We have that set up, and we're actually taking from the application. They clicked on the 10,000 pound application, so we're actually injecting that value in, as you can see right here. So we have the ability to put in a default value. We can also make these different fields that are associated with the signature required so that they're not able to sign prior to actually completing the signature. And that would be set to true. So say it's something that must be collected for the transaction to be valid, you're going to want to set that to be required. Moving on to adding the document, again, another simple one-liner to create the document from the document file that we have locally on the iPad here. And then being able to actually add that document, again, is just another single one line of code. Lastly, we need to add the signature. So our signature, again, is the signature that we defined right up here. And then all of the different fields that we want to associate with that signature are then added in a list down here below so that they're all tied to that individual signature, which is tied back again to that role ID for that person. So now that we've set up everything needed for the transaction, we can go ahead and sign it. So when we go back up to our sign up function that we called when we clicked apply, we can go ahead and kick off this transaction signing. And as Raheem was talking about, this is very important because once you've hit this point and you call the transaction, everything within the application, the workflow that you saw, the signature, the documents, all of that is taken care of by the iOS SDK. So there's no additional work that you have to do, making integration very easy. Moving on to then the dashboard that we talked about. I'm not going to specifically talk about the code that was used in the dashboard because reporting is different for everybody. You have different things that you're looking for. So I'll talk more about what data is available to you from eSignLive. So basically, one thing that you might want to set up for doing reporting is to know when events are happening within your application or within the signing ceremony. So we have a callback notification system that can be set up. So you would set up an HTTP listener, and then with eSignLive, you would set up your callback URL where the notification is going to go to. You can also set up a callback key, which would provide a layer of security. Essentially, the callback key would come through your authorization header of the post request to your listener for you to know that you're not being spoofed by somebody else. And then you'll see down here at the bottom that there are several different notifications that you can register for to be notified on, whether it's package activation, package creation, package completion, those types of things. And those allow you to then kick off a further downstream process, maybe store this data in your database to do your own custom reporting, or maybe also to download the documents. Maybe that's the only thing you want to do upon completion. Some of the data that's available is everything from the package JSON, so the package metadata is all available. It's going to include things like your signers, your documents, statuses, creation dates, completion dates, those types of things. You can get all that information through the API. And as Raheem was talking about earlier as well, we have our audit information. So who accessed it, when they accessed it, what they did, how long they were there, those types of things. All available through the API to enable you to create dashboards and reporting just like you saw. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass it back to Raheem to finish up.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michael. Okay, so just to quickly recap before we get into the actual Q&A section. What we showed you here is how you can enable a fully mobile account opening process with the help of our eSignature mobile SDKs. We showed you that you were able to capture a legally binding signature in a secure way. So the result at the end was a secure, tamper-evident PDF document with an embedded audit trail of all the information and the actions that took place during that transaction. And secondly, we were able to show you how to track the experience of that mobile journey that your customers are taking, using the underlying data that we've captured as part of that process. And what we took from that was we were able to pinpoint the areas of drop-off or confusion in order to further optimize that customer experience. Now, on the front end, that looked really easy, and it was meant to be really, really easy. At the end of the day, what we're trying to achieve here is the highest completion rates possible. And you want to ensure that your customers are completing that process without a frustrating experience. Now, at eSignLive, one of our key mantras is that integration should happen faster than pizza delivery. And all of the components that we showed you here today can be integrated into your own apps in under 30 minutes. It's meant to be that simple. So if you're interested in learning more about eSignLive and how to enable that fully mobile account opening process, we invite you to join the eSignLive dev community to access some of the tools that we provided today. So thank you very much for your attention, and we'll move on to some of the questions. Okay, so the first question is, what advice would you give to CTOs pushing for digital signatures but hitting opposition from board members who are suspicious or nervous of the technology? Okay, that's a really good question. We've been able to help many of our banking customers around the world make the case for e-signatures, right? So first and foremost, what we ask them to do is look at the paper-based process and how to digitize that process and the steps that you're going to eliminate as a result of that process. And what you can do is attach ROI to each step that you're going to eliminate. We've got a great case study about this, and we can help you with that. And then if it comes around with respect to the technology, we can definitely get into the details around the security of the application, of the infrastructure, and at the document level. Happy to talk more about that as well. Have you performed analysis on what countries accept this kind of e-signature by law? Absolutely. So we have a fantastic document called eSignatures Around the World, and we have a detailed map of all of the different laws and regulations around the world and how they apply. In most cases, e-signatures are legal in most countries around the world. And again, we can provide you with that level of detail as well. So you do signature verification? If yes, where and how do you capture the first signature? So yes, we do signature verification. What we're doing here is actually applying a digital signature. A digital signature is actually the encryption technology behind the electronic signature solution. So what we're doing is we're tamper sealing the document every time somebody signs it. And what this does is it helps guarantee the integrity of that document. And what you saw with Michael's demo in the PDF document, as soon as he clicked on the signature, it's actually checking if there's a match of the hash to make sure that the document has not been tampered with. So we have that capability provided. What's your business model? How do you make money? Great question. So we have different ways to monetize this, of course. I mean, we have customers that leverage our solution in an integrated fashion like we showed you today. And typically our pricing model works on a per document or per transaction level. So it's a SaaS-based model in most cases. We also have a deployment option on premises if that's what you prefer. But you can deploy it in a public cloud or private cloud. And then there's also a user-based model. So if you're using it in a scenario where you have, for example, agents in the field and they're going to be doing an in-person experience, it can also be done on a per user-based method as well. How do you validate signatures and identity? So we'll take the identity piece because I think that one's really important. So essentially we have multiple ways of authenticating the user before they can get access to the transaction. So we've got the standard things like SMS text code, question and answer, but we also integrate with third-party authentication systems as well. So ID verification systems. Our parent company is VASCO Data Security, which is an authentication company itself, and we can integrate with biometrics pieces as well. So there's various ways to do that, and happy to talk to you at our booth if you have any more questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.